All right, good morning again. Chapter 27, Contradiction and Deceptions. I think up to item 300, it's mostly a reading that does not add very much to the study of mediumship per se. I think has a more of a historical content. I think does, and I hope that does not really apply very much for us today, students of this doctrine. There isn't much to add here from what already was added on the chapter that deals with theories that we studied in the very beginning, and perhaps we can reveal some of it today. But nevertheless, I have considered just give a quick 5 minutes and jump to 301, but I don't feel brave enough to go skip things that perhaps be relevant for one of us.
Yeah.
So let's start reading, and we have, I think it's going to be a quick discussion, but please, all participation is welcomed.
Okay. So we begin. Contradictions and Deceptions. Contradictions. 297. The opponents of Spiritism do not hesitate to point out that its adherents do not agree amongst themselves, that not all even share the same beliefs. In other words, they contradict one another. If the teaching is given by spirits, they ask, why aren't they identical? Only a serious and in-depth study of the science can expose these arguments for what they really are. We will begin by stating that these contradictions which certain individuals make such a big noise about are usually more apparent than real, and that they refer more to the surface than to the depth of the issue, and that is why they are of no importance. These contradictions proceed from two sources, humans and spirits.
Go ahead.
Okay, 298. The contradictions of human origin have been sufficiently explained in the chapter theories number 36. One should understand that in the beginning, while the observations were yet incomplete, different opinions arose about the causes and consequences of spirit phenomena, and that three-fourths of these opinions have fallen before a more serious and in-depth study. With few exceptions, and apart from certain individuals who have not easily broken from ideas they have either nourished or engendered, we can now state that there has been a unification of the vast majority of spiritists, at least as to the general principles, except perhaps for a few insignificant details. 299.
Oh, that's good, thanks.
Okay.
One of the things that is important for us to put in perspective as we read this, that this is a time when this has been published. That is even before the completion of the codification. This is the second book of the codification. It is the very beginning of a new science, of a new doctrine. And it would be more skeptical, it would be more what's the word? I would have more doubts of the seriousness of this doctrine if there was not those contradictions, if there were not many questions being answered. When everything starts and it's not yet complete and it's not, and time has not matured it yet, I believe intelligent people, people who are free spirits free-minded to think for themselves, we will have plenty of questions. We will have different thoughts and ideas until all those thoughts, all those ideas converge towards one direction, being the direction of the truth, being the direction of the right. And until that happens, which takes time, I would expect anything that's serious, anything that deserves respect would generate contradictions and questions, especially when it's something that have been for such a long time being neglected, or being even more than that, put down as something that this belongs to the more ignorant individuals coming from the scientific field, or some things that belongs to the devil coming from the religious side of those times. On the chapter of theories, the very first item, Kardec already put that to us on item 36 when we read, when the strange phenomena of spiritism began to occur, or rather, when they began to recur in these later days. Very important here. Kardec already say we did not invent this phenomena. It didn't start with spiritism. It was there all along. It's only that these days it starts to happen with more frequency and becomes more noticeable by the society, by us at that time, perhaps. Okay. So when they began to recur in these later days, they engendered more doubt than anything as to their reality, or even more as to their cause. When they were verified by irrefutable testimony and by experiments that anyone could conduct, the result was that everyone had their own way of interpreting them according to their own personal ideas, beliefs, and prejudices. Hence, numerous theories began to appear which careful observation would reduce to a real worth. So again, it is expected. And in the very beginning, there was tremendous amount of interpretation. Very important that we recall Jesus when the Pharisee asked him what was the most important of the commandments. What was the answer from Jesus to that individual? He questioned, what does the scripture say, and how do you read it? And the very important nuance, something is written, but how do you read it? It's the same way that someone else will read it. The wordings, the piece in that piece of paper is the same, but will everyone read it the same way? So when the phenomenon began, and it was out there for everyone to see and to participate, did everyone interpret it the same way? And the item 36 on the chapter of theory, Kardec left very clear, no. The phenomenon happened the same way. If 100 people saw it, 100 people there was 100 different interpretations of it. Until again, after studies, after multiple observations, after putting minds together, those with good intentions would divert all those differences into one direction, and they would be unified in the direction of the truth, in the direction of the reality of what they were seeing. So Kardec says that these differentiations, these misinterpretations, these contradictions that was present, and Kardec does not deny it. Very important for us to understand that. He didn't say, no, you guys don't understand, there is no contradiction. Say, no, there is indeed contradictions. And in a certain way, we actually welcome those contradictions because it's from those contradictions, out of really serious minds, that we will be able to extrapolate what's false and what's real, what is based on prejudices and what's based on facts. All of us have our prejudices. Are we able to put reason above them? For those who are able to do so, then they would converge those contradictions, would eliminate the falsehoods, would stick with the truth. And there is, of course, the two sides, the human and the spiritual. And of course, by human said those incarnate. And if you get 100 people out of the street, we don't know who they are, and you present to them a true, real physical phenomenon, okay? An apparition, the levitation of a inanimate object. And let's assume there was a true physical phenomena, okay, just to avoid unnecessary discussion here. There was a true physical phenomena. There was a medium of physical phenomenon providing the ectoplasm, and there was really spirits performing that phenomenon. Out of 100 people, we cannot say that 100% of them would understand what was happening. There are those who will say that it's illusion, it's the work of illusionist, it's magic, it's black magic, it's the work of the devil, and many other theories. And perhaps around out of 100, there'll be 1, 2, or 3 who understand that there was a physical phenomenon. Can we imagine at the time of Kardec, when we did not have the completion of this doctrine, we didn't have all the explanation come from the spirits, it is more than expected there would be contradictions. And again, the contradictions are welcomed when they are serious and individuals are moving towards understanding the facts and being able to put the prejudices above fact, above reason. And then we will converge towards the truth and we'll have strong foundations, as Kardec did, for the development of this doctrine. Any questions, comments? All right, you can continue reading then.
Okay. 299. To understand the cause and worth of the contradictions of spirit, we must identify with the nature of the invisible world by having studied all its various aspects. At first glance, it may seem strange that spirits do not all think alike, but this will come as no surprise to anyone who knows about the infinite number of degrees that they must traverse before they reach the top of the scale. To expect a single view of matters, we would have to suppose them to be all at the same level. To think that they all should see things correctly would be to believe that all had reached perfection, which has neither happened nor could happen when we remind ourselves that they are nothing more than humanity minus the corporeal envelope. Since spirits of all degrees can manifest, their communications bear the stamp of their ignorance or knowledge. their moral inferiority or superiority. It is precisely for distinguishing between the truth and the false, the good and the evil, that our instructions up to this point have been provided. We must remember that there are pseudo-scholar and semi-scholar, proud, presumptuous, and theoretical spirits, just as among humans, since only pure spirits know everything. For the rest, as for us, there are mysteries that they explain in their own way, according to their own ideas, and about which they can form correct or erroneous opinions. Out of vanity, they want these opinions to prevail, and they love to repeat them in their communications. The error lies in the attitude of some of their interpreters, who rashly espouse opinions that violate common sense and regard themselves as solely responsible for divulging them. Thus, the contradictions of spirit origin arise from by the nature diversity of intelligence, knowledge, ability to judge, and morality of certain spirits who are not yet capable of understanding and comprehending everything.
Okay,
Continue.
thanks. No, thanks.
Okay.
So on 1928, Kardec speaks of the contradiction generated out of differentiation of humans, of human origin. And in this item, Kardec speak about the contradictions that comes from the spiritual world. In reality, it's pretty much the same, right? In reality, we are spirits living with the flesh right now. When you leave this flesh and return home without the physical body, our prejudices does not change. Our ignorance or smartness does not change. Our inability to reason does not change. It is truth, yes, that without the physical body, our range or our capability of perceiving things are extremely augmented, right? We're a lot more sensitive in everything, to everything that happens around us. But we have to use those faculties in order to be able to utilize that extrasensorial, intellectual, and everything else abilities. Because if we continue to condition ourselves to live in the spiritual world as if you are still carrying a physical body, we can do that. Our mind is extremely powerful. And anyone who participate in mediumship meetings has witnessed that very often that's what happens. So it's not surprised that if we have those contradictions as incarnate spirits, they would not change very much as discarnate spirits, especially when we, again, does not exercise fully the freedom that the spirit have, the ability of perceiving and gaining a lot more as a discarnate spirit, because we conditioned ourselves so much to live there as if we still are here. And another thing is, again, the doctrine was not being completely formed yet. It was just a baby take its first breath. So we did not know of the true nature of spirit, right? There was the idea that once we lose the physical body, we become something else, so to say. The idea that we continue to be ourselves was something kind of new for most of us. Right? So the idea may come in the interpretation of what the spirits are saying as well. Okay, how do, again, what does the script say and how do you read it? The spirits may be saying something and then we are interpreting in a completely different way. And I think that's extremely important. Kardec puts that the error lies in the attitude of some of the interpreters who rationally espouse opinions that violate common sense and regard themselves as solely responsible for divulging them. Thus, the contradiction of spirit origin arises from by the natural diversity of intelligence, knowledge, ability to judge, and morality of certain spirits who are not yet capable of understanding and comprehending everything. If we give a book, any book, take out Juana de Angela's book, Gratitude, and give to a smart 5 years old, to a smart 15 years old, to a smart 25 years old, to a smart 65 years old, each one of them have the ability to interpret, to grasp as much messages equally? The answer would be no, right? The 5 years old, the intelligent one, smart one, will grasp everything that mind, that brain is able to gather at that age with the experience that age has lived up to that moment. One would expect that a smart 65 years old guy would be able to absorb a lot more information, would be able to extrapolate a lot more messages than the 5 years old. It's just natural. Thing is, as a spirit, some of us are 5 years old, some of us are 15, some of us are 25, 35, 65, in moral and intellectual development. And even with the best of our intentions, we can only grasp as much. And unfortunately, some of us grasp 5% of the total and believes they have grasped 100% of it, and go and speaks and published that 5% as if it was 100%. Now, if I get 5% different from someone else's 5%, both 5% positive, and they do not have the humbleness, the humility to combine and make 10% and choose to fight, everybody loses. When they choose to put my 5% with someone else 5%, with someone else 5%, if you put them together, the three of us, we have gained so much, we have 15% of the truth now, of the 100% now. But because of our pride, we choose to diverge and say, no, this 5% that I have is the 100%. You guys are wrong. And we make that mistake very often. And of course, at a time when things from the spiritual world have unfortunately to create the idea that was uncontestable, that was not to be discussed with. If I just get 5% from a spirit, I will not argue, or not put that to discussion, and I will be with the illusion that I have 100%, when in reality I only have that 5%. And that is the great intelligence and the great value of Kardec, who did not get this doctrine from one spirit, who was not limited by his prejudice and even by his limited great intelligence, but collected as much information, was able to eliminate a lot of things that was not reasonable, that violate common sense, took his time, used experiments, and put together a doctrine based on facts, based on what was the best thing available for him, which of course comes from the spirit of the truth. But again, the doctrine was not even completed yet. And I'm glad there was these contradictions, because if there was no contradictions, it would become something dogmatic, and we would fall the trap of carrying only 2 or 3% of something that becomes a dogma, and we lose the other 95%. Okay, questions, comment? Okay, 300.
Okay. Some persons might ask what the use of good spirits teachings is if they do not offer us a greater degree of certainty than those of humans. The response is simple. We do not accept the teachings of all humans with the same confidence. And between two doctrines, we prefer the one whose author seems the more enlightened, capable, judicious, and less subject to the passions. We must regard spirits in the same way. Even though some are not above humanity, there are many who have surpassed it, and they can provide us with the information that we would seek for in vain amongst the most educated men and women. We must learn how to distinguish them from the crowd of low order spirits if we want to become enlightened. And it is this distinction that leads to an in-depth understanding of Spiritism. Even this information has its limits, however. If it has not been given to spirits to know everything, even less has it been given to humans. Therefore, there are subjects about which we would ask spirits in vain, either because they must not inform us about them or because they themselves do not understand them and can therefore only give us their own personal opinion. These personal opinions are what proud spirits state as absolute truths. It is especially regarding matters that must remain secret, such as the future and the beginning of things, which such spirits must insist on in order to give the impression that they know the secrets of God. This is also where we can find most contradictions.
I think it's interesting that some people would question what is the value of the Spirit's teachings if they do not all give the same teaching. Again, it comes from this false idea that once we become spirits, we, perhaps in pantheism, that we all go back to the total, we become a part of the total without our individuality. If we carry that kind of dogmatic, erroneous idea of our spiritual nature, then yes, we'd expect that everything that comes from the spiritual world would be absolutely equal. But since that's not factual, since we are individuals, we have each one of us our level of understanding of things. Each one of us have our prejudices and carry them when we go back to the spiritual world. It could not be all the same. Then come the importance of being able to use reason. When Kazakh says we do not accept the teachings of all humans with the same confidence. And between two doctrines, we prefer the one whose author seems more enlightened, capable, judicious, and least subject to the passions. And that is equal for incarnate and discarnate. What Kardec does here is put the ball in our hands, is put the responsibilities upon us to be judicious, to be to exercise our intelligence, and when we are exposed to different opinions, to different point of views, to be very careful on which one you would pick to follow, and make sure that you pick the ones that comes from individuals who seems to be more enlightened, more capable, more judicious, and least subject to the passions. And I think this subject to the passions is extremely important. If you take these days of tremendous amount of radicalism in almost everything, you can just use politics as an example. When you listen to those on the far right, we hear a lot of garbage. If you listen to those on the far left, we hear a lot of garbage. It is upon us as citizens, as voters, to be able to eliminate all that garbage, to be able to understand that the individuals who are giving themselves to the passions become radicals. And once you become a radical, you lose the ability of to reason properly. And it is upon us to be smart enough, to be judicious enough, to eliminate everything that has a radical tone and move towards the side that it's more enlightened, which very often the middle. That's why Buddha tells us, always pick the middle, not too far to the left, not too far to the right. Because in the middle, it's not the middle parallel at the level of the far right and the far left. It is above. If you imagine a pyramid, the middle is the apex of that pyramid. And the radicalism, going far apart from the middle, is the very bottom of it. So if you want to enlighten ourselves, we want to move upwards, we should be moving towards that middle and avoid the far right and the far left, where the radicalism predominates and reasons becomes lost. Comments, questions? And then Kardec start here with putting question to the spirits, to us, as always he does in most of his chapters, as in a very humble and proper way, say, listen, it's not really me. The spirits are telling us, okay? You may not like what I'm saying, but this is the, and again, there's a collection of answers from a diversity of spirits, of enlightened spirits, that Kardec was responsible to put together and bring to us the result of his hard work, which was to eliminate everything that was not reasonable, anything that contradict common sense, and compile the best answers for the most enlightened spirit as possible. And the lesson for us today is, because it still happens today, even among us spiritists, especially these days that you have been bombarded by an avalanche of information from the spirits. And if you go online today, it's such a huge amount of garbage that is impressive. To be intelligent, to see what are we going to accept, what we are going to leave aside, perhaps try to go back to that later in the future. And I think that we're just playing this card because we know better. And that is one thing that we need to really be self-assured. We know a lot. And we should be able to use our intelligence with the knowledge I have gained to be able to just pure and simple discard things that are against common sense, that violates intelligence.
Okay.
Comments, questions, comments? All right, so let's see some of those questions.
Okay. Should I do it one at a time or just go?
Let's do one at a time, and then we
Okay.
offer the
explain.
opportunity for anyone to have a comment or question, since this is ideally being more interactive.
Okay. Okay. Following are the responses given by the spirits to our questions concerning contradictions. Number one, can the same spirit communicating at two different spiritual centers transmit contradictorial opinions on the same subject? If the two centers differ as to ideas and opinions, the communication may be distorted because they are under the influence of different ranks of spirits. In that case, it is not the communication itself that is contradictory, but the way in which it is transmitted.
Okay, this is the intelligence of the answer here. Is again, go back to Jesus. What's written, how do you read, and how do you read it? Right? And here the importance of this other is the center may be being influenced by a different rank of spirits. So let's suppose that in a group 35 incarnate, they're together. If you have 35 incarnate in that spirit center, you can multiply that number by a lot, right? The number of discarnate spirit over there. And let's assume that the great majority of those spirits, let's just put a number, 100. Let's just say it's just 100 spirits. They all vibrate and at the same line of thought. It will have an effect on the incarnate ones. Again, we're being bombarded by energies, by thoughts continuously. And we may be influenced. And we are being influenced most of the time. And if we do not use our intelligence to be above those influenced when they are not productive to us, we may be influenced to misinterpret what's being said. We may allow the influence of the spirits to guide us to misinterpret the message being written or spoken, especially if it's spoken, because then we cannot go back. If it's written, at least can go back to it 100 times and say, and eventually perhaps extract what's fact and what's not. But we would not imagine the possibility of the same spirit providing two different contradictory messages at different space. Or at least we're talking about here more enlightened spirits. Spirits were there to teach and to guide us. But then again, the spiritual center is a nucleus that converge energies of the spiritual and the physical world. And the incarnate, the number of incarnate in that center will attract the spirits with mind-like ideas. So it is our responsibility that once we always, but especially when we go to the spirit center, but again, always, to try to maintain our thoughts elevated, to try to reason in accordance with the teachings, let's say, of Christ, because that way, when we get together in our center, 10, 15, 30 of us, all with the same kind of elevated thoughts, we will attract mind-like spirits, and it's very unlikely that you will be influenced to misinterpret any communication that comes from the spiritual world. All right.
Okay.
Elmo, may I add something?
Please.
I just wanted to say that the continuing vibration in the Spiritus Center has been consistent as far as I have been there. That is the beauty of working in a group, in a collective, in one direction. So I just wanted to really emphasize that. And we are very fortunate that we have this going for us. And I do thank you.
I agree. And I think it's a collective effort. It's not of one or two individuals. It's the majority of the minds that created that atmosphere, if you will. And that's why in our prayers, I was trying to remind us that responsibility that we carry to one another. I'm responsible for the success or not of the work for everyone there, and each one of us is equally responsible. Now, being careful, we all have good days and bad days. We're not always with the best state of mind when you go there, and it has happened to me many times, and I'm sure I'm being an average individual. I imagine has happened to other individuals also. When that happens, that is the importance of the collective suppressing the deficiency of one another that day, like the herding effect, right? If 10 minds are towards one direction and one mind is diverging from that direction, that one mind loses its power because it's being surrounded by the good energies of the 10. So if I get that tomorrow and I'm not on my best day, I count that the rest of the group will pick me up and will suppress my deficiency on that day.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We go to number 2. We can understand that an answer may be altered, but when the character of the medium excludes any possibility of evil influence, how can high order spirits use diverse and contradictory language concerning the same subject and with individuals who are completely serious?
Okay, just a minute.
Uh-huh.
Close the door here. Let come in. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Continue.
Yes, please.
Okay. Truly high order spirits never contradict one another. Their language is always the same with the same individuals, but it may vary according to place and person. Therefore, note this well. Contradiction is often only apparent. It is more related to words than to ideas. Thus, upon reflection, one can see that the fundamental idea is still the same. What is more, the same spirit may respond differently concerning the same question, depending on how highly evolved the evokers are. It is not always proper for all to receive the same response, because not all are equally advanced. It would be like a child and a scholar asking you the same question. You would obviously respond to each in a way that will enable each to understand and be satisfied with the answer. In this case, even though the answers are different in form, they will have the same essential meaning.
Okay. So again, we go back to the 5 years old, the 15 years old, the 25 years old, the 35 years old, and the 65 years old. And let's assume that the topic is human reproduction. And let's assume that whoever is giving the explanation of this is a human reproduction expert. Okay. If that if the reproduction expert providing truthful, meaningful information about human reproduction, it will not say the same things to the 5 years old, to the 15 years old, to the 25 years old. But it will not give false, wrong information. It will provide that what the 5 years old is able to absorb without creating more difficulties for the understand of that 5 years old. Will not shine a light that is too bright for that age. And when it's speaking to the 15 years old, it will provide as much that 15 years old can absorb, which should be a lot more than the 5 years old, but perhaps not as much as it would provide to the 25 years old. Now, individuals who carry already malice in their minds, individuals who are already against, let's say, spiritism in this case, who will use the information provided to the 5, to the 15, to the 25, and say they diverge. In the reality, they do not diverge. They are comparable to the crowd that this information is being provided. It is said that Jesus did not speak the same way to all the groups that he met, that he had a way of explaining things to the simple fisherman at the beach. It would provide the same set of ideas, equal truth, to the scholars in the synagogue who were able to interpret, to observe a lot more. But the lesson will be the same. Let me retract that. The amount of information given to one to another would all be truthful, but would be added to those who could get more, and would take in a little bit of it for those who could not take as much. Now, for those who did not like Jesus, for those who were against, and Jesus used those different ways of saying the same thing, accuse him to be contradictory, contradict himself. But we would never expect that enlightened spirit would provide contradictory, diverging lessons to different groups, would provide the truth, limited to the ability of that group to absorb that piece of truth, and would expand on that for those who are better prepared to receive more light. Questions, comment? Okay, number 3.
Number 3. Why is it that when serious spirits are with certain individuals, they seem to accept ideas and even prejudices that they warn against when they are with others? We must make ourselves understood. If someone has a well-established conviction about some doctrine, even if erroneous, we must lead them away from it, but little by little. That is why we often employ their own terms and seem to go along with their ideas, so that they do not suddenly take offense and stop learning from us. Moreover, it is not proper to sharply attack preconceptions, which would be a good way for us not to be listened to. This is why spirits often speak in terms of the opinions of those who listen to them, in order to gradually try to lead them to the truth. They adapt their language to these people as you would do if you were a skillful speaker. That is also why they will not speak to a Chinese person or a Muslim in the same way they would to a French person or a Christian. They would obviously be rejected. One should not see as a contradiction what is but it is usually only a developmental phase of truth. All spirits have their mission assigned by God, and they accomplish it according to the conditions they consider proper for benefiting those who receive their communications.
I mean, what else can I add to this answer? What part of this is not well understood by each one of us, right? If we, with our understand of spirituals, with our understand of our spiritual nature, that is limited, of course, go into, let's say, with all respect again, okay, to a, I don't know, to a Baptist or to Presbyterian or any of the Christian groups, and start to speak of our understanding of our spiritual nature, is there a good chance that it would offend their beliefs, that it would offend their understand? Is a good chance they would rebel against what we are saying? Is a good chance that they would, if already rejecting what we believe, what we understand, then they will be even more against it. So one must be careful. If you go to native individuals, Indians, who believe in godness, in physical things, believes that the sun is a god, the moon is a goddess. Are we in the right to go over there and say, no, you guys are wrong, this is craziness? Do we have such a right to put down their beliefs and force our understand upon them? Or to be wiser to take what they have and try to build on that? So very often that's what the spirits will do to us as well. It's closed, honey. Sorry. That's what the spirits will do to us as well. That's what they have done to us as well. Perhaps I would imagine even before the spiritism, before the doctrine, they would take what we have, perhaps our belief in they believe the divinity on physical things and try to build on that. And eventually allows us to reach the conclusion that it's not really those physical things, not really the moon or the sun that are goddesses, but in reality, there are spirits that work and are able to help us in different ways. It would lead us to reach those conclusions ourselves instead of imposing them upon us. So, in light of the spirits having compassion towards us, understanding our limitations, respecting our free will provide information in accordance to our ability to receive. Again, too much light blinds us. And if we're not ready to receive it, we're going to just plain reject because it hurts my eyes. Why should I look at it? But if we got gradually increasing the amount of light slowly, then the eyes can adjust to it, to a limit, of course. Same thing with our ability to reason. We can only go so far, and the spirits know that limitation, respect that limitation. And we should do the same. That's one of the things in the very beginning of the study of spirituals that kind of fall in love with this thing, but it's still full of passion. So you're going to spread this to everyone, everyone will take this. But which one has their own time? Each one has their own limitations. Each one has to fight their own prejudices. We're going to give as much as we can. When they are ready, they come for it. We are putting a book, a spiritual book, outside of the door of our center and stay there for weeks before somebody take one. We put there for people to take, but it sits over there. I'd just love to put a camera and see how many people have put their hands on it and look at it. Oh, spirit's book, no way. And how many would have the curiosity to open the page and take a look at it? Each one at their own time. And those who feel strong about it will take, because it's there to be taken. It's not stinging or anything. So far, only 2 books have been taken. I wonder if I come on one day that we put one there, the next day you have to put another one. I'd love to see that happening. But so far, no. The book's there. The information's there. Want to take it, take it. How much are you able to allow reason to overpower prejudice, to overpower dogmas? Each one at their own time. I cannot force it. All right?
Okay. Okay, number 4. Even apparent contradictions can cast doubt in the minds of certain persons. What methods should we use in order to recognize the truth? In order to discern error from truth, one must delve into the understanding of our responses by carefully and seriously meditating on them. A true study must be made of them, which requires as much time as other studies do. Study, compare, and meditate upon the issues. We have constantly affirmed that acknowledging the truth has its price. How could you expect to reach the truth by interpreting everything according to your own narrow-minded ideas, but which you consider so great? The day is not far off, however, when the Spirit's teachings will be uniform not only in their details, but also in their main aspects. Their mission is to destroy error, but this can only occur gradually.
Just a minute. Okay. It's pretty much the reinforcement of what was said at item 3, right? Even apparent contradiction can cast doubts in the minds of certain persons. What method should we use in order to recognize the truth? 2 things here: serious study and an ability to overcome our prejudices, overcome to go beyond our the ability to go beyond our limitations. One thing that I always say is that we have to understand and be somewhat comfortable with our limitations, but never be limited by our limitations. And that we can always expand it. We can always take one step forward. But in order to do that, it requires effort. It requires studies. It requires what Kazakh says, the Spirit says over here, that it's not easy and we have to give up something. In order to get something, we have to give up something. And what we have to give up? Time studying them. We have to get free ourselves from some of those dogmas that are so strong in our makeup. You have to have courage. You have to have courage at times to swim against the current. When everybody is going in one direction and you have understood that the right is a different direction, have the courage and swim against the current. Not easy, not everyone is willing to do it. And it's not even a matter of courage, as I have said here, but I think it's be willing to do it. to find worthiness in doing so, because it takes a lot of more effort to allow us to swim in the direction of the current than to swim against it. It's a lot harder. One really must find the worthiness in doing so to expand all that energy on it. And it is an energy, intellectual energy, courage, perhaps even to be rejected. Oh, you joined that group, you're no longer my friend. You know, we have to give up something to gain a lot. Comments? All right, number 5.
5. There are persons who have neither the time nor the ability required for serious and in-depth study, and they accept whatever is taught them without examining it. Wouldn't that put them at risk to believe in error? Practicing goodness and not evil is what is essential. There are not two separate doctrines for that. Goodness is always goodness, whether done in the name of Allah or Yahweh, because there is only one same God for the universe.
Okay. There are persons who have neither time nor the ability required for a serious and in-depth study. Is that really true? Well, nowadays, let's forget the time of Kardec. Let's consider us in our society today. I'm putting the question out there because I really don't know the answer. I mean, does you guys agree that we cannot find a few minutes every day or take one day out of the week at least? They accept whatever is taught to them without examining it. Isn't that what, in my opinion, just a kind of intellectual laziness? Personally, I think it is. And could it put those individuals at risk of, I believe, in error? I believe yes. If I'm not willing for 2 days to think for myself, if it's easier to take whatever is given to me without putting much thought of it, yeah, I do believe that exposing myself to error. So even assuming that indeed there are individuals that don't really have the time, can't really put a more serious and in-depth in studies, there is one thing that everyone can do, and there is one thing that perhaps erases everything else, which is the practicing of goodness and not evil. And I would say even more, if someone is really able to live in this state of practicing goodness and not evil, perhaps doesn't need to spend any time going through what we are doing over there. They already get it. They have a very decent and good life, and the teaching of spiritism is not to make us better prepared to live in the spiritual world, just to be able to practice goodness here and not evil. That's the whole objective doctrine, is for us to be good here, to do all the good that you can do here, to do to others what we would like us to do to us in the same situation here. If those are doing that, they don't have to spend time doing an in-depth study. They're already doing what is the object of the doctrine to teach us. So since, in my opinion, most of us are struggling very hard in practicing goodness and not evil, then we have to find time, have to make time to sit here and go through these in-depth studies in order to gain the ability to live our lives practicing good and not evil. Comments, questions? Okay, number 6.
Elmo
Yes.
is yeah, I don't believe in coincidence, but it's interesting what you just say, because I was listening to a lecture from Raul Teixeira this morning about the spiritist and lucidity or clarity. Don't know how to translate that properly. And he was kind of trying to call the attention of the spiritists regarding our posture, our way of doing things within the movement itself. And there was a part that he was saying that there's a lot of us that we play that card that we don't have the time to study. We don't have the time to do this and that. And, you know, sometimes we go to the spirit center just for the passes or whatever. He wasn't saying that was a bad thing, but it's kind of a faith without reason. Then if we don't even understand what a passes is, what vibration is, what energy is, what, you know, concepts that, you know, and he was saying sometimes are basic concepts that we have in the spiritism. How can we believe in something without understanding? And what's the difference between us and those, you know, other religions? They are extremists that, you know, sometimes they believe in whatever they say, go, you know, doing bad things, believing that is a good thing, you know, killing and bombing and whatever. And that's one of the things that you said just now that hit home, because in this day and time and era that we live, we say that we don't have the time. Is I think we need to reevaluate the, you know, what we are doing on the spiritism, because there is a responsibility that follows when we are, especially those that are trying to work and trying to be active on the teachings and try to, you know, do things that we are doing right now, studying and discussing and trying to, you know, share our opinion with people that still have a lot of misconception of what spiritism really is. So I agree what you said, and I just wanted to share this this other part of this lecture that I heard this morning.
Yes, thank you for that. And but it also goes along with we are saying here, right, that you need to be very respectful with the limitation of others. If the best that I can do today is go to the center to get passes, I don't even know what it is, but I heard there's something good, and that's what I'm for. During the studies, I'm just sitting there waiting when this guy can shut up and get my passes and go home. I mean, I'm wasting a tremendous amount of opportunity, right? I am limiting myself to my limitations. I'm not having the courage to expand on it. But if that is the best that I can do today, then it's better than be fighting in the corner. You know, myself personally, I think that we waste immense amounts of opportunities in our lives, and especially we spiritists. That's why I forgot his name right now. I'll catch his name now. When he went back to the spiritual world, he asked he was allowed to build a hospital. I wanted to receive spiritists because regret is very painful to the spirit. And when we see all the opportunities that we wasted, we feel such a bad regret that we need some help. And we have this place to receive that help over there. It's really the courage to take one step ahead, to expand our limitations, to make us more open to receive more things. And I believe that it's a kind of snowball effect, right? I mean, it gets to a point that you get a momentum that things become a lot more easy, become so much more confident and self-assured that we can expanding our limitation, that we can go forward, that things start to roll a lot easier. In the very beginning is the hardest time, but if you already was able to accept the concept of spiritism, if you don't find the time or the energy to study in depth, it's already one step. And then slowly, until the snowball gets enough momentum and start to roll downhill at a greater speed, it's a process. It's gonna take time. It's going to take time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just to make clear, I mean, it wasn't saying that whatever little we do is not important. It is important, as you just mentioned. And this lecture was kind of more focused to people that, again, that are, you know, like yourself and João, and, you know, that are working, that are, I know, kind of leading the movement. And he was trying to make them, try to have them to be aware of you can't just be a spiritist and still not, you know, reading the books, or just be a spiritist that just go in lectures and don't read the books, or don't apply yourself, don't try to understand and study, and just reading half books, or the kind of spiritist that only follows in Facebook and Instagram. We need to apply ourselves and try to improve as much as we can. Otherwise, we're just gonna pass it on half truth, and that's not what the movement's about. We need to study, apply, understand, and try to get as close as the message as possible, according to everybody's level of understanding.
Just as an example, yes, I agree 100%. Even before SDNY, when I start going to a spirit center in Queens, you have to go up the stairs to get into the center on the second floor, and right at the top of the stairway there was one advertised all in Portuguese of as you know, the study of the doctrine by Fab, and everything was in Portuguese, and in big letters it says, "Are you going to live it for the next incarnation again?" Study of spiritism, right? And how many times I went down that stairs, and I've even paid attention to this. One day when I looked at that thing, it hit me like a punch in the face. Are you going to live it for the next incarnation again? At that moment, also, I want to get a little more in depth in my studies with the doctrine. I'm not gonna live for the next incarnation anymore. I've been up and down that stairs so many times, but that day it was really a punch in the face. It hit me so hard that I said, I cannot live for the next incarnation again. It's going to be just the little beginning of it, but it's going to start now. I'm not going to start the next incarnation anymore. Each one at a time. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people went up and down those stairs and did not get that punch, but some of us did, and start to take it a little bit more seriously. One simple question: are you going to live it for the next incarnation? And the worst is again. It has a value for one and not that much value for others.
Excuse me, Elmo. That was not live it for the next. That was leave it, right?
Leave it, yes.
No, wait until the next reincarnation. I got it. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. Very true.
Yeah. All right, number 6.
Okay. How can spirits who seem to be intellectually evolved entertain obviously erroneous ideas about certain matters? They have their own doctrines. Those who are not very advanced, but who think they are, hold their ideas to be the truth. The same thing happens among you.
So how can spirits who seem to be intellectually evolved entertain obviously erroneous idea about certain matters? Don't you see it all the time? Very brilliant mind who just have a completely different view in certain things, in their ideas, because they already carry their own prejudice. They already carry their own dogmas and limit themselves to, to those doctrines, not willing to expand it, not willing to put the effort to replace it with something better. But again, if they're able to go ahead and live practicing goodness and not evil, who are we to say, no, you have to fix your attitude? You're already doing everything that we're supposed to be doing, that this doctrine is guiding us to move towards that direction, to be able to practice goodness and not evil. Seven.
Okay. What about doctrines that only accept communications from one spirit in particular, such as God or Jesus? A spirit who teaches this wants to dominate and therefore imposes itself as the only one. However, the unfortunate spirit who dares to assume the name of God will pay dearly for its pride. Such doctrines refute themselves because they contradict the most widely verified facts. They are unworthy of serious consideration because they lack foundation. Reason itself tells you that good proceeds from a good source and evil from an evil source. Would you expect a good tree to produce bad fruit? Have you ever picked grapes from an apple tree? The diversity of communication is obvious proof of the diversity of their origin. In fact, spirits who want to be the only ones who communicate fail to mention why others cannot do so. Their pretentiousness is the denial of what is most beautiful and consoling about Spiritism. That is, the relations of the visible and invisible worlds, and of men and women with their loved ones, who would otherwise be lost to them forever. These very relations are what identify men and women with their future, and which detach them from the material world. Suppressing these relations would plunge them into the torment of doubt and would feed their selfishness. If you were to examine the doctrine of these spirits, you would find unjustifiable contradictions at every step, proofs of their ignorance regarding the most obvious things, and thus sure signs that they are little evolved, the spirit of truth.
Okay, this should be the last one.
Yeah.
So what about doctrines that only accept communications from one spirit in particular, such as God or Jesus? I mean, when you read this, forget about the answer. When you read this, what comes to your mind? If you had to answer this question, let's say that this question is being put for each one of you. What about doctrines that only accept communications from one spirit in particular, such as God or Jesus? I mean, we can get each one to answer, but I would like to believe that at this moment in our lives is just plain laughable, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll take with all seriousness that this is a doctrine or it's a group of individuals that at very high risk, as we saw in the question, what I believe, saying that we are at risk if we are allowing ourselves to accept the idea that only Jesus and only God is providing information to us. Then every information that we receive It is the absolute, irrefutable truth that you must live by. How dangerous would that be for us? And clearly, for us, Spiritism is an absurd, right? It's something that we would absolutely refuse, but it is for everyone else. Aren't there individuals who may sell themselves so cheaply to actually accept such doctrines? Other individuals who accept they not even come from the spiritual world, come from incarnate spirit, people living the flesh like us, able to convince the masses that they are the representative of God, of Jesus, and everything that comes from their lips is actually come from God or from Jesus. Aren't those individuals who sell themselves because they exercise their free will and they sell themselves so cheaply to those doctrines, to those individuals at a very high risk? And if so, are those individuals who practice that, incarnate or discarnate, not placing themselves at a very high risk and have to deal with a karma, so to say, responsibility for what they are doing? Assume that we are responsible not only for the errors that you commit, but for the errors that will lead others to. And it's not by chance that this answer comes from the Spirit of truth, because the seriousness of this. God gave us free will and intelligence, the seeds of it for us to develop, of course. For us to waste it with not exercise reasoning, just believing that individuals can be solo representatives of God or Jesus. Sorry to say, but that sounds so naive that it's hard for me to accept that people actually do this. But unfortunately, it's happening. And the truth is, those who practice that are placing themselves to have to undo tremendous amount of errors by taking this. Incarnate or discarnate. I don't care if those who use the name of Jesus, the name of God, they're not because they use the name of Jesus or God, but because they are stimulating others to believe in this falsehood. And if what are they saying is good and right, is it still right to call themselves Jesus, call themselves God? Of course not. And when this answer comes from the spirits of the truth, it tells us the seriousness of this subject. Reason itself tells us that good proceeds from good source and evil from an evil source. And a good source would not pretend to be what they are not. A good, decent individual would not fool someone else, even if with the intention of giving right information. But likely, if someone is using the name of God, to use the name of Jesus, it cannot be for the most best of the intentions. Only the fact that one is pretend to be something else is already dangerous in itself. So no, grapevine will only produce grapes. They may sour or sweet, that's a different story, but they're not going to provide apple. And I cannot come here and pretend to be Jesus because I am not. I cannot provide what I don't have. But if someone chooses to believe that I am Jesus, I am extremely responsible for this serious mistake, but I'm responsible for all those mistakes that individual is doing, believing in me. And of course, that individual is also responsible for being so silly, so ignorant to buy that. But less responsible than I. So this is very serious stuff. And when it comes from the Spirit of Truth giving us this answer, it's because it sees the seriousness of this topic. But our time is up. If anyone has any comment, we can go ahead and do it. If not, then Carol, go ahead and do our prayers if you can, please.
Oh, sure, sure. Thank you, Elmo, and thank you everyone today for participating. Beautiful session. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks to be together again as brothers and sisters for our studies of the Gospel according to Spiritism. We're on Chapter 27, topic of Contradictions and Deceptions. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors, the mentors, the good spirits, and teachers for guidance, inspiration, and teachings. Spirits of all degrees can manifest with different levels of knowledge and moral development. Only pure spirits know everything. Contradictions can arise from both human and spirit origins. Contradictory opinions are worth studying thoroughly and carefully. We have to exercise our intelligence, our effort, and reason to move more toward the middle way in order to avoid distortions and extremism. Allan Kardec received valuable communications from many spirits, which is the valued quality of the books of codification. We are truly grateful. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies and mindfulness, and may we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within our hearts and minds. May we offer our prayers of healing to those suffering spirits in the physical world as well as those in the spirit world. May all the spiritist centers in the world continue to grow and to expand in goodness and in service. As we close our meeting today, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. And may we go forth today as beacons of love, light, and peace. Go forth now, so be it. Thank you.